Hello and welcome back to part 4 of the algorithms video series. In this one, we're going to try and build on our utilities library. Currently, we only have the linear search in there. We're going to build on that, and we're going to create a function that can create us any length of a random list that we would like. We're going to be able to use that in order to test our linear search function, and I'll introduce being able to write out to CSVs so that we can create some graphs from it in a following video. As always, I'm going to start just by writing it in standard code, and then we're going to try and turn that into a function. If we look at the random module, there's a bunch of really cool things that we can do, including this shuffle that allows us to shuffle the order of any list. W3 Schools, by the way, is a really great reference for finding out things about Python. So if you want to look at the random functions or all of the functions available inside that random import, then you can look at it from here, and you'll be able to use some really cool stuff to be able to do what you need to do. The way that we're going to do this is I just want to basically be able to make a list of any size and shuffle it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these up here, and I'm just going to delete everything just so we can get started on this main part of our code. So the first thing is I'm just going to create a list, and I'm going to call it my list, and I'm going to make it equal to a list that is of range. Now, one thing that I've explained quite a lot of times in my years of teaching is what exactly is a range. So I've got a Python console over here, and if I say that A is equal to range 10, what it's actually doing, I mean, you can look this up on W3 Schools, but what it's actually doing is it's creating an actual object of range 10. If I press enter here, and I ask what A is, it tells me it's a range. It starts at 0 and it ends at 10. The range function can actually take multiple different values. I know it's a bit off topic, but we can say that we want it to start at 10 and we want it to go to 20. And then if I see A, you see that it's a range between 10 and 20. The point about this is I want to actually create a list of those. So the way that we can do this is we can just if I make A equal to this range of 10 again, and then if I just create a list of A. So if you see that if we put list around it, it's just like converting it to an integer. What we're doing is we're converting this range to a list. So the range was a range between 0 and 10, and then I turn it into a list, and what you get is this list. It's a list of numbers. The cool thing is we can actually shuffle it. So how does that really help us? Well, if we create this list over here inside of my list, so I'm just going to say list range, and for now I'm just going to pass in a value of 10, and that will just give me all the values between 0 and 10. If I, as before, if I print my list, you'll see when we run our code that we have the list with all the values between 10 values between 0 and 9. The cool thing about this is we can actually shuffle it as well. So we can say random.shuffle, and we can pass in the actual list that we want to shuffle. So it was called my list. Now this function actually does it in place, so it works on the actual my list. So even though we're passing it as a parameter, it actually overwrites it, so it doesn't pass anything. This shuffle function, it doesn't return anything from the function, so it just shuffles it in place, and you can see from the help there. So now when I print my list, what we should see is that we have the values, but they're completely shuffled. So every time I run it, they're completely randomly shuffled. So let's turn this into a function. First up, let's identify what we want to return. Well, obviously we want to return a list back from this function. We also want to take in as a parameter the size of it. I want to be able to make this any size that I like, so that becomes the parameter that we pass to it. So if I turn this into a function, I'm just going to do it. Actually, I'll do it actually, I will do it up here. We'll call this function get random list, and we will pass in the size. So I'll call the variable size for that one, and then we'll look at what bits of code that we might actually need to do. So all we do is, I'm going to copy this, so I'll Control X this out and put that in here, and I'm going to say return list of the range between 0 and size. That will hopefully create the list all in one line of the range between 0 and size and return that list. So now we can test that this function actually works before we do the actual shuffle part. So rather than keep going, we'll just keep test that this part works. So if I say my list equals, and I'll use my call, and I'll pass in, let's see what I want for size. Let's try 10 because, and then we will print my list. So this in theory should print all the values between 0 and 9. If I pass in 100 and run it, it should do all the values between 0 and 99. So passing in the parameter works really well. So we just need to make sure that we do that shuffle part as well. So it's maybe not the most readable thing in the world, but we'll do it this way. So we'll create a variable to hold it. So we'll call this new list equals, and then we'll be able to shuffle new list and then return it. So if we do a random dot shuffle, and then we pass in the new list, which is the thing that we've just made, that will shuffle it in place, and then we'll want to return new list so that we have the shuffled list, and then we return it. So it could probably be done in less lines of code, but this makes it slightly more readable. If we test this, we should see that we'll get whatever number we put in here, we'll get between 0 and 1 less than this number, and it will be shuffled when it comes back, just like that. So before we add this to our utilities function, we should write our little description of what it does, and I'll just say returns a random list of values from 0 to size -1. So it's a very descriptive explanation of what this function actually does. And then because I've got my utilities already, I can just drag this out, Control X, go to utilities, make sure I've got a couple of spaces at least between each of my functions, and then paste that in here. So I've got 2 spaces between each function. It just makes it a lot more readable when we do this. The issue we have with this one is that this random is required by shuffle. So all of the imports usually go up the top. So I'm going to have to import random in order for this to work. And again, 2 spaces between, so it's nice and readable. Go back to main.py, and I don't actually need the random anymore because we're going to import this the different values that we want. So I'm not actually importing linear search. I'm just going to import, what did I call it again? Get random list. So I'm going to say I want to import get random list, and I just need to use the name. So I'm importing get random list, and we're just running the piece of code that we had earlier in here, test code, to use our function get random list, passed in the value of 100, and then print it out. So it should do exactly as it did before.